There's a point in undergraduate physics where burgeoning young physicists take quantum mechanics and then have this existential crisis for months, maybe a good year or so to,
Fast. I've like taken the ball and run with it and
yeah.
like let it alter my dating strategy, Scrum, my therapy sessions. It aligns with my somatic experiencing therapist modality, which is very interesting. Oh, I have a quick story. I did the foundation year program at a University
Yes.
of King's College, which is reading all the modern works of literature from the very first like account and then
Yeah.
up to postmodernism. At one point, they had this random physicist, probably a Dalhousie professor, come in and describe how you put a clock on the jet and then you bring the clock back down and you have the
Yeah.
synchronized clocks and then one clock is faster, proving that standard time doesn't exist. A second is not always a second. We had all gathered in the Great Hall, the whole university, and literally people were crying and walking out like it was a movie. It was just a lecture, but they were getting so upset about it. They were losing their shit. And I don't understand why this is having such an emotional reaction for everybody, but it did. I would say that that guy lost 75% of these philosophy majors. They were unwilling. I am unwilling to accept that. This is la, 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 la.
Oh, yeah, philosophy majors are the worst for some weird reason because philosophy majors really want to invent a world of suppositions and then live in that world. If you give them, well, here's what we observe, man, they do not like it. A certain percentage of them just lose their mind. But physicists lose their mind too. So
suppositions are a bitch, I would have to say. When we first moved to Los Angeles, there was an earthquake within 3 months of us arriving. What's a high one? 4.5? Is that like
I lived
one?
in Chile, a high one's 10, but okay.
Okay, well, okay, yeah. So you're like, whatever. Man, it was big enough that I was under the table on the 14th floor and the building was built on rocker panels. So it's swaying like a palm tree. And I'm grabbing the table like, don't swing me through this window, because it was floor to ceiling glass windows, a luxury apartment. It ended. We didn't die. We all came downstairs. And I remember thinking, I didn't realize until this moment how I just supposed that the earth part doesn't move.
Yeah.
And now I can't suppose that anymore. And I feel strange about that.
What do you mean earth is a fluid?
Yeah, I didn't realize until it started moving that my supposition was that the earth stayed flat and strong and hard, and that was it. It was it was a constant I could depend on, just like standardized time.
So it's exactly that experience. People are, no, but I built an entire worldview on this. You can't just take this piece out and they lose their shit.
I guess there's benefits to not having a very strong sense of self.
Oh, you are like particularly willing to be like, oh, these are the set of suppositions. All right, let's use those. Like, most people are like, no, I cling to these. I think because Lara embraces impermanence. So I'm just going to discard that, the set of suppositions and put onto a new one. No problem. No worries.
I never really thought of that. I embrace impermanence, but I guess so. Pension plans, apartments, all my belongings, relationship. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's the ground wasp thing. Always keep moving.
Yeah, always keep moving. One might say a trauma response, but who knows, really? It could also just be the wave of the future. I was watching the Agile CEO co-founder.
Sure.
And he was talking about how whatever came before Agile was what was used, but everything has changed. And now agility is the main value. Oh, I got the agility part. It's not impermanence that I'm aiming for. It's agility. That's all.
There you
I'm not
go.
Trying to destabilize myself constantly.
Even though it's the norm, like, people still struggle with it. It's another one of those worldview shifts. When you do agile software development, there's actually a manifesto. Right? These are things that are important. And some of them are things like empowering the team. And organizations really struggle with that. There are certain sets of suppositions that are hard for entities to absorb, even at a giant institutional level, down to the personal level. I think it's because we build models on them.
Do you think it's because you can't absorb a new one until you see the old one clearly? With the earthquake, I didn't realize that I had made this assumption in my mind that my life was built on flat earth that didn't move. You can't be agile if you don't know where you're standing.
I think it's like pain of change. Part of your old neural structure has to die. If you have a supposition and you built a bunch of things on that, a relationship, right? Oh, we're in an utterly faithful relationship. And then you find out that one of you is not so faithful. there's all the stuff built on that. This is Jordan Peterson's example. He uses all the time. You don't, all these things that you thought were fixed points are now no longer fixed points. So that means a lot of things have to change. In AI terms, you got to go retrain that model. And that's computationally expensive and energetically expensive, and people don't like to do it. We don't really like to think. It's very expensive, right? So what we try to do is we try to make a model of the world, then distill it down to fast heuristics that we can just kind of run the heuristics. I'm going to assume that the Earth doesn't move at all, and therefore I can build things on it. And I'm never going to go revisit that. And if you have to revisit it, it is very painful for people.
That actually makes sense. I would make a decision with my husband and then new information would come in and I would want to go back to the drawing board, and he would criticize me for that because he thought I was undoing all these decisions that had been made. But your decision has been now proven wrong. This is the wrong decision, but I made it. So I want to follow through on this.
Yeah, I'm invested in it.
It did not matter. I would get a piece of paper with math and walk through the numbers to show him that this was the decision. But now we have all this data. It's wrong. The math does not math. It doesn't matter. I'm doing this.
One of the things you learn in physics is that we don't really understand the world. We build successive models or approximations to that. And if you're a good model builder, you are willing to discard your model whenever it's falsified. Most people, including professional scientists, who that is literally their job, frequently have a really, really hard time with it. Because an approximation, if it's not that wrong, it's still very useful. There's this phrase, all models are wrong, but some are useful. But people don't emotionally react that way. They marry the model. They make a model, and they're invested in it because they don't want to go through the pain of revisiting all of those assumptions. If you change all the time, if you're very fluid, then it's hard to build anything. So you got to make some assumptions. And then if those assumptions aren't 100%, well, how far off are they? Physics had this giant crisis back at the beginning of the 20th century when they almost all worked out. And then there were a couple little things, that weird edge case observations that they couldn't quite square, black body radiation, something Einstein explained called the photoelectric effect.
What's a photoelectric effect?
It comes down to when you emit photons. That didn't make sense from a classical point of view. Things are continuous in classical mechanics. You should be able to get one of any energy. But what you found was that the math worked better if there was a specific increment. It was the first glimpse of the fact that you don't live in a continuous world. You live in a discrete world. We're very familiar with this in the digital age because we don't have continuous photos. Like you and I aren't continuous. We're really a bitmap of lots of little pixels. But it's good enough to look continuous to us.
Like 35 millimeter movie film.
Right.
We watch a movie and it looks continuous because it looks like our reality. But if you look at the movie film, it's a million stills.
Those stills are themselves made out of pixels. It's good enough to give us the approximation, and then our brain is, good enough. I'm convinced it's reality, and off we go.
That fluid motion is something that our brain does, not something that the movie projector does.
Very insightful. And so everything is like that. The reality is that our reality as we perceive it is really constructed in the brain. And this is where, many of the consciousness philosophers argue back and forth about this. We know that that's true because there are visual experiments that you can do that show that you are constructing reality. One of the obvious ones is that there's a hole in the middle of your eye because your optic nerve has to go through it, but you never see that. Your brain just fills in the scene. It's doing exactly what we do with AI models now, where we're like, just extend this scene. It's doing that all the time.
Make it more, make it more, make it more. That's black space, but I'll just take what I know and push it.
If you lose an eye or you drive with one eye closed, you still do a perfectly good job of estimating where things are, despite the fact that you don't actually have stereoscopic vision. Your brain, I'll just interpolate it from what I see.
Just guess at where that tree is. It'll be fine. It'll be fine.
And it's so good at it that it almost always is fine. If you watch your finger, bringing it to your nose, you can see that at some point your eyes are actually switching one to the other, trying to figure out who's tracking it. And your brain just fills all that in. My eyes are actually fixed different. I've had surgery such that one of my eyes is close and one of them is far. It's called Monovision.
What? I'm sorry. Let's just back up for a second. You made yourself a cyclops?
Yes.
Shit, I didn't know about David. You just breadcrumb it out a little bit. Okay, so most people have LASIK. That's I know. You shave off a little bit of your cornea. That changes your depth of field. I got into a big argument with somebody at a party once who was, it's a very small risk, so why wouldn't you do LASIK? You'd be hotter without glasses. Because the risk is I lose my eyesight. hotness and eyesight, they do not correlate in my mind as being a bet to place.
Yes.
Okay, go on.
LASIK. And Jen actually had a different surgery. She has lenses implanted in both eyes. Because what happens is, over time your vision changes, and then you've got glasses, and so, but you can only see far or close. Your glasses either correct you to be close or far. And for a lot of people that works out. But if you need to have both close and far fields of vision, I always had one eye that was dominant for close work and another one that was okay for far work. My contacts were actually different prescriptions. When they did LASIK, they essentially permanently fixed it into the eye, such that I have an eye that is adapted for close viewing and another one that's adapted for far viewing. Your brain just stitches it together. Now, some people have a real hard time with that. For people who do monovision, which is what I do with contacts anyway, the world is just continuous. So instead of things get blurry at a certain point, everything looks fine all the time. Like
your focal point, because I learned photography back in the Nikon FM days, you would turn the lens and then you would fix your focal point. And if you turned it all the way, the focal point would actually be infinity. And there was an infinity symbol. So you telling me you're looking at infinity all the time?
I don't know enough photography to know, but I can look at anything in any distance and it's the same level of clarity. I can look at this Coke can on the desk. I can look at, way out in over the horizon through the window, and it's the same clarity all the way.
But when you're looking out the horizon through the window, are you simultaneously seeing your Coke can with clarity, or is it blurred?
I have to look at one specific thing, but let me try this actually.
No, hold the Coke can up against the window. Is there one blurred? Is there a foreground, background situation?
No, they're actually both clear.
Holy shit, David.
Yeah. By the way, this is awesome if you're shooting pistol. Because normally you can only see one thing. You can see the target or you can see the sights. You get a choice. But I see the sights and the target both clearly.
I've never heard of this surgery, but I think that there would be like a lineup of men if that was their marketing campaign. I bet that gives you amazing accuracy.
You can do it with contacts too. It's just called monovision. But what's happening is one eye takes over close distance and one eye takes over far distance. For a lot of people, that is very disorienting. If you adapt to monovision, and I did very easily with my contacts before I got LASIK, then everything's fine. So my brain fools me into thinking that I have, focal point infinity, I can see anything everywhere I look. However, I'm actually only using one eye plus a little correlated information from the other eye to do that. So what happens is at night, then it starts to become bothersome when you're driving. I actually have gotten driving glasses to correct my close eye far out because you only get half the light. And at light, there isn't a lot of light. You think your brain looks at something and takes a picture and that's it, but that's not what it's doing. It's like a continuous integrator. It's building this virtual reality in your head based on the observations that it can take. And what happens is at night, the far eye can't get enough light to fill everything in as well as it would like to. It's just harder to perceive. It's to describe, but not quite right. Or night glasses to take the far eye, the close eye up to a far distance, you can just see more, just actually more light. You solve things quicker. It's not that they seem sharper, but it takes less time to resolve them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Have they done gender studies, like gender difference studies? Because women have 30% less night vision than men.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, we just don't see at night. This is my understanding. We should really fact check ourselves, or at least we should fact check Lara. I tend to put a half of a thing I learned with another half of a thing I learned, and then say it with such conviction.
Well, all right, let's pull up Perplexity. Let's see. Do women have less night vision on average than men? Women generally have less night vision on average than men. Interesting. You're right. The difference is attributed to several factors. Physical eye structure. Men have larger pupils. That makes sense because at night you need more light. Allowing more light to enter the eye, reach the retina, structural advantage. Men's retinas contain more rod cones. That's interesting.
Is rod the middle or the outside ones?
Which is which?
Oh, cone.
Or rod cells, sorry. Rod cells versus cones. There's rods and cones.
Rods are the outside, I think, and cones are the inside.
I know women's color vision tends to be better. So maybe it's the distribution of rods and cones that helps with that.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, okay. So it's women have some advantages of vision. Faster adaptation. That's interesting. Color discrimination. Women have better color perception. I thought they did. and slightly better overall vision. That's interesting. Low contrast acuity. And then they say, well, it's possible that this is evolutionarily because women gathered stuff more and men hunted more. Who knows?
Actually, I was thinking the opposite.
Right.
I was correlating a lack of night vision with perhaps a natural, we have more monovision.
Okay, so let's see. Are there gender differences in preferences for monovision? Yes, significant gender differences in preference for monovision. Interesting. Research indicates that women are more likely to choose and adapt to monovision compared to men. Huh, all right. 2-1. It's huge.
I called it. You said that and I thought, interesting.
I guess it's about the adaptation. See, this is sort of related to what we're talking about. Psychological factors. Men are more likely to reject monovisions because it requires your brain to accept a new mode of sensory input. Their vision is crazy and brain perception is crazy. They've done experiments where they do things like they give people mirror glasses that they can see behind them or that swap their visual field in different ways. And they will quickly learn to work with it. So you can really mess up somebody's visual field and their brain will still synthesize it back together. And this is the bigger idea, which is that your brain learns to use tools and the tools of your body are the tools that it learns to use. You see this with like the Neuralink implants where we're going to give people, psychic power to play games with their mind and I can manipulate the cursor with my mind. And then pretty quickly they're cursoring. Your brain doesn't really care. It has to learn to use your body, which is why it's so difficult for us to learn coordination and ambulation things. It takes us years to learn how to walk. Very unusual among species. The pro side of that is that if you give people different modes of sensory or manipulation interface with the world, they'll just adapt to it. Your brain is I'll just pick it up. So apparently women are more flexible cognitively that way and adapt better to monovision. I don't know. I always liked monovision, so it works fine for me.
Well, I'm glad to know that it exists because I noticed that my eyesight is changing and the stuff that used to be very close is not clear anymore. I have to go to the doctor. But all that to say, I was on a date and this guy was telling me about, there's a huge concrete mixing company down the way a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a guy that worked there for years. And you could call him and say, I want 23 PSI mix. And you would get 23 PSI mix. And he would just do it with his physical body in his mind. He would mix concrete, massive amounts of concrete to exact ratios. So They got a fancy new computer system. They fired the guy. They didn't give him severance. The computer system was inaccurate and then broke. Then for 3 years afterwards, that company was boycotted because this guy, they called him back, but they had like fucked him over and not given him severance. So he was fuck you guys. He was probably, honestly, knowing like the culture, he was probably making minimum wage. But he could measure with greater accuracy.
Yeah,
and then
highly skilled,
but with his body and there was another story about a machinist who gets billed out on a machine that costs thousands per minute. And he works with 1/100th of a width of one of my hairs as a machinist. And he is his own instrumentation. But I wonder if we're much more finely tuned instruments than we realize. And we don't notice because there's this supposition that you need external instrumentation to measure stuff. I had to hang so many pictures with all of my moves, having to hang like 20 pictures and then 20 pictures again. I slowly started realizing that I can hang a picture, anything, at exact 0
dead
degree.
level,
no problem. Not even eyeballing it, just like done. Done. And then if I check them, they're all 0 degrees. And then I started checking with my iPhone because maybe it's off, whatever. Nope, 0 degrees, 0 degrees, 0 degrees, no problem. I find this with bakers, the measure with your heart, that's the thing women say when they're baking. Baking is a real science. So if you can measure with your heart in baking, you're actually getting that amount PSI because it's chemistry. You can't be off that much. It's not cooking, if you don't have the ratios, you don't have the ratios. I used to joke, how people have 3 skills? One of mine is parallel parking. I can parallel park any vehicle in any situation, downtown LA, middle of rush hour, no problem, one shot. I never go out and come back in. It never happens to me. And I think that's angles,
Yeah, people are amazing. You watch the Olympics, for example, and you just look at all of these feats that these people are doing in all these crazy ways. The things that we can do, we are extremely powerful computationally and physically. Our control over the physical world it's amazing. And
And we don't notice it. You'd think I would have noticed it. I was today years old when I learned I could put anything dead level. You'd think I would have noticed that at some point earlier.
I think
but
this was just our world. Like, we're good at using technology. Now we're obsessed with technology, but we forget that we have all of these capabilities just as people. And before technology was a big thing, like it was all people, it was all skills. It was all just like, this person in the explosives manufacturing plant has an incredibly steady hand. And they found people who were just amazingly good and developed to be expert level masters at that thing. Here's another cool little factoid. This one also from physics class. The number of photons that you have to have before a human eye that is properly dark adapted can perceive them. Guess how many photons you need?
Okay, say the question again. The number of photons you need before a human eye that is dark adapted, as in I go into a dark room for a while until my eyesight adjusts. And then
and I've got an adjustable light.
How many photons before I can see something, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay, how many?
1.
Don't say 1. Did
It's
you say 1?
Yeah. A properly dark adapted human being can perceive 1. Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy.
So we see in the dark way better than we think.
How many photons are in a flashlight to give people
reference? Yeah, I know. Just uncountable numbers, just giant numbers.
A lot. There's a lot.
Yeah. So if you make the light smaller and smaller, just imagine that you've got, a lighthouse and you scale down to like a lantern and you scale down to like a match and you scale down to like a spark. You can keep scaling down to literally the physical limit, to one atom emitting 1 photon within the range that you can perceive it. And you can still see it.
Light is powerful.
It is. But I took my picture with my camera and it doesn't look the way my eye sees it. Yeah, because you have neural processing equivalent to AI that does all that, just fixes everything all the time. That's the world you live in. It's not really the world that the camera sees.
Heck, we did forget that. I was a fine art photographer's apprentice in my 20s. I don't even think I had a timer. You just had to do it. You put the photo in the water, it started developing. At some point, your brain went, it's done. And then you whipped it out and hung it up so it would stop. Mm-hmm. Or, you put it in the next bath to stop the developing, and then you hung it up to dry. It was just a judgment call, really, most of it. Even putting it down to expose it to the light. You'd put the little slide, the negative at the top, and then it would beam light down, and you would expose the paper, the photo paper that you put underneath it for a certain amount of time, and that is how you made the photo. Then you put it in the bath to develop it and stuff. But all of that had to be calculated with just your body senses. You would do maybe 3, you do one for 10, 15, 20, but you had to just pick on your eyesight. There was no computer is what I'm trying to say, this is the right thing. And even when I was a barista at Starbucks in my early 20s as well, I would have to pull these espresso shots, and I would pull like an espresso shot constantly for 8 hours a day. And you got so good at just doing that because it was an old school machine. Now they have a button that presses it, and the computer decides the grind and the temperance and blah, blah, blah. The computer is pulling the shot. The person is just standing there as the button pusher. Yeah. They're not as good now. I don't like Starbucks, but before it was really good coffee. Like it was pretty stellar coffee in like 2004.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, skill. We devalue skill because we want to commoditize it. People are capable of amazing things. In an earlier discussion this week, we were talking about this idea that people are relying on AI too much. And one of the solutions that I propose is analog vacation. I think, for example, that kids should have a certain amount of time when they go, like what they don't have electronic. Here's your 2 weeks, put your phone in the bag. Here's your cabin. Here's a book. Here's a flashlight. And you're going to learn what you're capable of interacting with other people and the world around you. And it doesn't take that long. I think that would actually be a giant thing, but you really have to separate from doing things the way of convenience and develop yourself in new ways. That's where you get a lot of intellectual and emotional growth, learning to solve new problems yourself. And you find that you have all of these capabilities inside you that can be unlocked and unlocked and unlocked in levels.
Oh yeah, exactly. I've done an approximation of that. I did a Datin.
What's that?
Datin refers to moon, and is a length of time. So moon, like month-long meditation retreat. I did it at Cormacholing in Vermont, so it was a Shambhala one. You just sat and did shamatha, which is where you notice your body breathing and you watch your breath exhale. So you have 20% attention on inhale and double that on exhale. And then every 20 minutes you get up and you do the same thing while you're walking slowly as a group around the circle. There were about 80 of us that started. There were 5 of us that ended, and I was one of the 5. I feel pretty like,
Yeah.
and it halved every week. So there were 4 weeks. We started with 80, 40, 20, 10. Yeah, I bet there were 8. There was a little bit more. Maybe there were 8 that left. Anyway, so
What's it like?
it was different each week. So the first week, a lot of men go to these things to pick women up because you get really horny the first week because you're so desperate to get any kind of stimulation. Like all I did was sit and think about what I would want to buy on Amazon. That was my version of that, because all the guys were like, ugh. I clocked them immediately because they were like all up in their feels, like woke guys. I'm like, I don't fuck with you, woke guys. So the second week you get what they call is hot boredom, where you feel like you want to get out of your skin. You notice you're seeking outside yourself for good things like support, emotional regulation, all that stuff. And you don't have that. So you look out and there's nothing there, and you get upset physiologically. And then the third week, you get cool boredom. You're still super bored, but you're chill about it. So things like you would watch an ant. I've done this. You would watch an ant walk from one side of your mat or in front of your mat, because there's 80 of you. You're sitting in almost military style, like in rows. You watch an ant walk slowly across the wall, like the walkway, for 45 minutes minimum. And you just think that is the nicest, most interesting thing you could be doing right now. Like, you are entranced with this ant. You want to know what's going to happen when he hits that guy's toe. Like, you are so into it. So at that point, I think if you put yourself in front of like Sunday cartoons, your head would explode because you've lowered the stimulation to what they call cool boredom. And the reason that you want to do that is because only from a position of cool boredom can actual spontaneous insight and creativity and newness arise. So you take yourself down to baseline, and then week 4, you get superpower skills. On the last week, I land on my knee while I was sitting and meditating outside. I looked at the bee and I realized that I had developed the ability for my eyesight to be like an eagle, telescopic. So I had zoomed in like an iPhone zooms in. I had zoomed in on this bee so that I could see his hairs, his individual. Wow. I could see his whole self as if he was right here under a microscope. And we just chilled out for a while and I just watched this bee. But I was very keenly aware that all of a sudden my eyesight had changed dramatically. And it was 100% clear. I've had glasses since like junior high.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so things like that. And also I stopped wanting to buy stuff from Amazon. That like chilled out after the second week. And that was obsessive. That was like smoking, the level of smoking addiction. Like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God.
So it's about 2 weeks of continuous meditation to avoid wanting to buy stuff from Amazon all the time.
Yeah, you had to detox. You had to detox.
Good to know.
I finished that. I came home and my whole life took like a left turn, I would say, right after that. I think what happened was I had been single. I know I don't seem like it because I'm always constantly obsessed, but I had been single up until 34, I would say. Just single. And then with once a year, 1 month long shenanigans, whatever, but it was not a thing. And I finished the Datsun, and my one thought I had was, I feel a bit lonely. I think I would like to have somebody. I came home, I met my husband, and then, the rest is a shit show. But the whole Datsun altered the trajectory of my life. I am 100% sure of it.
So that's pretty amazing. Okay, as somebody who doesn't meditate, right? So when you start it, like what's the starting process? Because if I'm naive, I'm thinking, okay, if somebody tells me sit in a room, focus on your breathing, I'm going to be focusing on everything other than my breathing.
No. Do you want to hear a little story of how I started meditating?
Yeah.
Because I didn't grow up in a Buddhist household. I grew up in a science, Darwin first, completely agnostic household. There was no mention of God. I had a narcissistic principal when I was in my early 20s, say 23, that I worked for. She had gotten pulled from a school the day before school started because the parents found out she was coming and just fully boycotted, picket lines, all that stuff. So they pulled her and they were like, what do we do with this woman now? We got to pay her salary. She's full-time permanent. And they plopped her in my school the day school started. But she had all these charges of bullying. Like 10 teachers in her previous school had gone to the union to lay grievances.
That seems to be a theme among principals. It seems like that's a profession that really attracts bullies.
Well, it's a profession where you can fail up. But yes, it's power and control. Who is more powerless and harmless than a bunch of children? So who is going to be attracted to having that kind of
Oh my God, we've set up totally the wrong incentives. Oh, you're right.
There's two different people that go into teaching. I'll just say that. It's really it comes down to the why. Why do you want to have access to these kids? Power over or power to?
So you get the bad principal.
Digress. I get the bad principal. I am super depressed and I'm starting to get worried about myself. I'm going to make an appointment to go to the doctor, which it's Canadian socialized healthcare. So that I got to wait 2 weeks minimum. That was fast at that time. I thought it was slow, but now. So I started meditating because I was depressed and anxious. And I didn't know that it was because of my work environment at the time. Every morning religiously, I just got up, went to group meditation because I knew I wouldn't meditate at home. So went to the group. Sometimes the group was me and this guy named Robert Halpern. And God bless that man. He showed up every day and it was me and maybe one other guy. So he and I meditated together every morning and then Lara drove to work. And after 2 weeks, I was cured. And so I didn't get drugs because I had laid a baseline, data collected. I could see definitively, I don't feel like I need a pill anymore. Therefore, meditation works. And therefore, I was hooked.
So what's it like? And did someone teach you to meditate? How did that actually work?
Yeah. Shambhala has a pay-to-play system. Yeah. So they have different levels. I went up to say master's level and they have fancy names for each one. They have there's a Garuda, there's a tiger, there's a snow lion. They're all apex predators is their branding model.
They're like karate studios.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they got fantastic colors. It's all this bright orange. It's the same bright orange as I've decorated my apartment, really vivid. It's almost like blaze orange, but it's not 100% blaze orange. So you go every weekend and they teach you a different step. And then you get into the deities where you pull in different parts of the ego process. It's very complicated.
Okay. So there's an instructional method. So you're going to someplace to learn and they're teaching you.
Yeah. For 1 weekend, you learn. So the instruction for shamatha is you watch your body breathe. You sit there cross-legged on a very uncomfortable piece of foam and you exhale and inhale and you watch your breath. When you notice that you are no longer watching your breath, your brain has gone to what you want to buy from Amazon. You label it thinking and you come back and you watch your breath. So that's shamatha. There's Hinayana, Mahayana, Vajrayana. So there's these different levels of shamatha. And then I went to the desert outside of LA. Nothing but bunnies and military installations that have no name and are not on maps, but you can see them from the road. That structure doesn't exist. Anyway, I went to this Vipassana. Different guy, or it's all about your thoughts being what created what's the thing in the States where it's a big hole in the ground and people hike across it?
Grand Canyon?
Yes. Your thoughts create the Grand Canyon. So you have a thought and it's like a little piece of water that creates these deep grooves in your psyche. So the body, like we were talking about measurement, the body is the subconscious. And then you go back to the top, up the back. They start by getting you to scan your nostrils and then scan the tip of your nose. It's these gradual, and it's 10 days. It's completely silent. You say nothing to anyone. You make zero eye contact, and they segregate it, men and women, because they know about the first week horniness thing, I think. So you have no contact with men, make no friends. You have your own little room, and it is intense. It's 10 to 12 hours a day of just doing this. So when they get to the point where you scan the body, you are in so much pain. It's like do you ever have a massage and the guy pushes here and all of a sudden it's like blinding white pain and oh, it's a trigger point. It's like that. Your entire body, you realize, is a trigger point. You release all of this emotional pain. You're not in pain before.
Okay. It's just there all the time. You just don't perceive it. And then when you turn attention to it, I see.
Exactly. It's exactly like the trigger point. Like it's not like your masseuse is actually pushing so hard that it's causing you pain. It's that your masseuse can find where they know the pain already exists and then tip it. Like you were saying with the quantum, it's 0 and 1s. It's on or it's off. The pain registers at that 1 photon level. So it's off at 0 photons. Your eyesight is on at 1 photon. If you push or if you scan, if you increase something just by another photon, it turns on and you're aware of it, if that makes sense. It's not a gradual awareness. It's you're not aware, but you're so close to the tipping point. You had another photon and you're aware of it and you're like, oh my God, I'm in so much pain. Does that make sense?
So I guess you just filter out, like, you have this incredible system of nerves and you're filtering almost all of it all the time. And this is about trying to take off the filter and look at what's really happening.
Exactly. You're not aware of the pain that you're walking around with. So it's going to lower your filter and notice your sankharas. And you don't eat dinner and you only eat vegan. I loved it.
I've heard it's totally transformative. I've heard about this.
I would say it is. I might have just been in a different place having already done the Datin. So then I go to LA and all of the famous people, Goldie Hawn, Jerry Seinfeld, who else comes to mind? Their main spokesperson is the guy that did Twin Peaks. What's his name?
David Lynch.
David Lynch. Jerry Seinfeld credits it with his success on Seinfeld.
Interesting.
And he literally says, I was only doing transcendental meditation once a day when I was doing Seinfeld. Imagine if I had actually done the recommended twice a day. He is like, my career I owe to. Wow. And David Lynch, there's a David Lynch Foundation for transcendental meditation. Like the guy, I think, just gives like most of his money to him. So I went and I learned that. And that is the opposite. It's so perfectly LA. Okay, marketing, focus group. Like, what do people not like about meditation? What are the pain points? Okay, pain points. They don't really like sitting down because the cushions are uncomfortable. Like they're very uncomfortable foam cushions. Okay, so let's you don't have to sit on cushions. Okay, what else don't they like? They don't like the whole like watching your breath, like thinking, like they don't really like that. Okay, you can just think about whatever you want. Okay, great. What else are they like? Well, the whole soft gaze and having to have your eyes open stuff, they don't really like that. Okay, you just close your eyes. That's simpler. They just took all of the stuff you don't like about meditating, everything about that is hard about shamatha. Sit up straight, have good posture, watch your breath, don't think. They just got rid of it. Like I'm exaggerating, but it was a very short process where the guy taught me in like 15 minutes and then he's like, go, be free. You transcendentally meditate now. And I was like, wow, that was way easier than Shambhala. And I don't know.
Is it effective? Because it sounds like maybe it wouldn't be.
Effective. No, it's super effective. It's the thing I do now. I do a mixture, but now I do transcendental meditation because it's like medication. It will make you think that you gave yourself a Valium with 20 minutes. And it's true. If you're very stressed, there's something about repeating a mantra to your brain, just rockabye baby. It would happen to me regularly that I would have to have a nap after I meditated because I got into such a deep state of relaxation.
This is really interesting. And a quick backstory, like, so in the paper, the Elephant in the Room paper that Lara and I wrote together about
you're so good at plugging it. Governance. I never remember. You're like, we're academics, by the way.
Yes. About AI alignment. One of the things that we had kind of proposed is that we take science fiction seriously as a library of scenarios.